hello, fellow person from the internet. Welcome to this weird corner of the internet where I sit in front of this tree in my backyard and talk about things that I want to talk about. Today, I'm going to be talking about this little lens that I've got here. This is from a company called Artisans. A lot of you probably have seen this lens before, know about it. It's a little 25mm f1.8 lens from Artisans, a company out of China. And it's really interesting. And I would like to tell you why I think it's interesting, if you'll give me a couple minutes of your time. So this lens, first and foremost, the reasons I like it, one is super inexpensive. So if you're looking to get into a cheap kit with a cheaper, mirrorless, one of the older bodies with a crop sensor or micro four thirds camera, this lens is going to be great because it comes in about 65, 70 bucks. I've seen it go for a little bit cheaper than that even on Amazon or wherever with deals. Sometimes you can pick them up used. But for what it is, getting into a cheap system with a wide aperture, little tiny lens, prime lens, it's great. It's a great value. One of the reasons that I really like this is because it's not very intimidating. It's a pretty small lens. If you're looking at somebody, if you're taking a picture of somebody, the bigger the lens, I've found at least, the more intimidating it is to the person that you're trying to take a picture of. And sometimes that can lead to them running away. If it's one of the chickens that I've got here, if it's a dog, sometimes they won't look at you because they see you're covering up your face and you get this big contraption. And sometimes the images and the moments just won't be as candid. And that is something that I've found a lot of over the years that I've used different lenses, different cameras. I tend to get better, more realistic, more candid images if I'm using smaller lenses. The second, I guess third reason that I like this lens is that it's really interesting. It has a really imperfect, interesting optical formula. And what I mean by that is it's very soft in the side, very sharp in the middle, and gives you a lot of like that swirly kind of fun bokeh. A lot of people try to edit their images to look like that. There's a very famous the Petzval lens that does sort of that, but the Petzval lens is not very sharp in the middle. This is a fairly wide lens for that purpose, but you can get some really interesting images, some really interesting portraits, interesting images of things. And I think it lets you get images, it lets you get images that you wouldn't be able to get with a lot of the modern lenses that aim for, that extreme corner sharpness, that try to get optically perfect and maybe a little bit sterile. This lens does have some flaring that'll pop up here and there, but it just overall makes for a really interesting lens. Kind of gives you a different side of creativity when you're using it. Another thing that I really enjoy about it is how close you can focus with this. On here, it says that you can focus at about 6.5 inches. I'd say probably that or closer. I don't know. I don't carry around a measuring tape and measure stuff out, but I'll show you some images that I took really close up. And it really allows you to get some really neat images and be a fairly good all-around lens. Now we'll get to the things that this lens doesn't do very well in just a little bit here, but this lens can give you some very interesting sort of faux macro images because of how close you can focus, especially compared to a lot of other lenses. And it's pretty interesting that you can get so close with this lens because a lot of lenses just don't. I've got, talking about a big lens, speaking of a big lens here, no, I guess it's not huge, but a very similar focal length and very similar aperture. This is the Fuji 23 1.4, just the old one with the little clicky clutch ring here for the focus. This lens has a much longer minimum focus distance, and I think it's about a foot or so, and this will let you get about half of that. which allows you to create very interesting images like I was talking about. It also allows you to get close up to smaller things and blow out the background. With the chickens, I've taken some pretty cool shots with the chickens really close up with their heads, and the background just disappears. And I'll show you some of those. I'll put some of those in here as well. Some of the reasons that you might not want this lens, you might want to avoid this lens. First off, the aperture. Let me focus you in real quick here. The aperture on this guy, where we go, is declicked. So if you are taking video, this is great. I don't do a lot of video, especially not with this camera. Hi, and you can tell that I don't do a lot of video because I can't focus it in there. Can't remember to focus it in. This is great for video. For photo work, if you're just using it all the time, open at 1.8, and you don't mind, any of the weird things that come from that, which we'll talk about here in a sec. You can just tape it over. You can grab it every time and just slam it over to the far left, and it's going to give you that, essentially that exact satisfaction every time. If you are a little bit more dynamic, which I try to be, here and there, it's going to be a little bit frustrating when you bump it. If you're trying to get to a specific aperture without pulling your eye off the lens, because of course, and we'll talk about this in a second, you can't tell what aperture the lens is at while the camera's up to your face. There's just no way of seeing it, which is another thing. We'll get into that. But yeah, that can be a little bit annoying. Let's talk about that actually. The next thing on there is that this lens has no contacts for any sort of internal chip. So there's no computer chip inside. There's no microchip. I don't know what you want to call it. But that means that you don't get any EXIF data. The camera won't show you what aperture you're at. It's not going to show you any of that stuff later on in your files. And also something that's kind of annoying if you're an X Pro shooter, X Pro 1, 2, 3, whatever. Those of you who know about it, you get bright frame lines in these, sort of like rangefinder frame lines, and that's going to show you what your image is. And with these, it's not going to automatically switch over to that. I know it's not that big of a deal. You can go into it, change it, but if you're constantly changing lenses over and over, it's just going to be easier to use the EVF, something that I don't necessarily love to do. But that's it, it is what it is. You gotta make some sacrifices for some cool images from this little guy. The other thing that's kind of annoying about it, this lens in general, is that your corners aren't going to be super sharp really ever. So if you're planning on using this to take big landscapes, and I have something that I'll throw in here so you can kind of see what that would look like. If you're shooting at wide open, you're going to get some really, really weird, kind of gnarly looking edges in your images. It kind of looks a little tilt shifty. It's interesting if that's what you're going for. You can get very cool. Whew, got a lot of wind coming in here. You can get some really cool lomography looking images with it. But overall, it's not going to be the best lens for wide sort of landscape. Anything that's flat, it does have a little bit of field curvature to it, so you got to get used to that. Also, with this lens, the lens itself is not weather sealed. So over time, the aperture ring on mine is actually pretty good still, but the focus ring has become a little bit gritty, and I don't know if that's because dust has gotten into it. I haven't taken it out in the water or rain or anything, so I don't know how it would hold up to that, but it does seem to have got a little bit of grit in there, and that you could feel it when you're moving it around. It hasn't affected the quality of the images at all. I don't see any dust actually like in the lens, in the elements at all, but that is something to keep in mind. Then again, it is pretty cheap, so if you do break it, just pick up another one. It's not like it's something you're investing your whole life savings into. Overall, I think it's a good lens. I have a hard time not recommending it, especially if you're getting into the mirrorless game. If you're getting one of the cheaper, older cameras, and you just want something that's a wider aperture, something to play around with and have fun with, that's going to make really interesting images. You could even use this if you were a wedding photographer. I was in the past. I can see situations where this would make really cool, interesting images to add to a shot list for some of my clients. But it's not going to be something that's going to be your one and only lens. The look is kind of probably going to get a little bit weird over, some amount of time. You're not going to want to have that swirly, sort of ethereal look all the time. And, if this was a, $600-700 lens, I'd say it's a little weird, maybe think about it. But for how inexpensive it is, I think you can get away with a lens like this in your kit, something to throw on when you just want to go and have fun and make some interesting images. So that's going to conclude my little review here of this little lens. Wow, it is really picking up out here. So I'm gonna sign off here. Thanks for watching. I'm never gonna ask for your subscription or your likes or anything on any of my videos on this channel. That's just gonna be more of a relaxed channel. So, but if you did like the video, those buttons are there. I obviously would appreciate it. It'll help me make more content like this in the future if it's something you enjoy. Also, let me know, do you like this lens? Have you had it before? Is it something you'll pick up in the future? Did you have it and get rid of it? Is it stuck to your camera all the time because you love the images? No hate either way, right? Let me know. Let me know down in the comments. But until the next video, I will see you guys later.